evening, my name is Angie Vandermerva and I am here with my team, RA to the 4th consulting firm. My colleagues here with me today are Anjan, Reese, Aaron, and Allison. Today we're here to recommend to Kristen's Cookie Company add an additional oven in order to increase capacity and reduce the bottleneck. The agenda for today is as follows. I will take you through the executive summary, followed by background and assumptions and a few key concepts. We'll then proceed to the analysis, the results, our recommendations, and our conclusion, and then we'll open the floor to questioning. The main problem facing Kristen's Cookie Company today is that the oven has the least amount of capacity, which is limiting the output. The current cycle time is 27 minutes per dozen cookies ordered, and an additional 10 minutes for every additional dozen ordered after that. Our short-term recommendation is to purchase an additional oven, and our long-term recommendation is to purchase a convection oven, which will reduce baking time. My colleague Aaron will now take you through a few of the key concepts before we dig into our analysis.
Thank you, Angie. I'd like to begin talking about some of the key concepts in the case and in the operations process. The first one is capacity, and that deals with the maximum rate of output. Like any business, you want to maximize the return on your investment, and capacity basically measures that. The second item is cycle and batch time, and that deals with the amount of extra time it takes to produce one extra item. And one of the key determinants in figuring out your cycle time and your capacity is a bottleneck. The bottleneck is the one item in the process that you would want to focus your energy on to reduce your capacity and cycle time. As you'll see later on, the bottleneck is the baking oven. While we begin here with some of the background and the assumptions in the case, I want to focus on three main assumptions. One is that all orders and all calculations are for just 1 dozen cookies. We've got to want to standardize the calculation process. Secondly, with cost, we're going to focus on mostly at some cost and just be worried about the variable cost of ingredients and boxes per an order. Right here you see one of the key things with understanding, identifying the capacity, cycle time, and bottlenecks is drawing a process map. And as you can see, the process map outlines each step currently here for Kristen Cookies from the beginning to the end. We identified the longest time here as the baking oven, as the bottleneck of 10 minutes. And this item here basically limits your capacity and your cycle time. My colleague Anjan will go ahead and walk you through some of the calculations on the capacity.
Thank you. As Aaron mentioned, the oven is our bottleneck, and thus it's limiting our capacity and our total cycle time. So we ask ourselves the question, how many orders as a company can we fulfill per day with the current operations that we have? The result of this is 22.3 orders. And the main reason for only processing 22.3 orders per day is our average baking time is 10 minutes, and there's not much improvement we can do there unless we purchase another oven. We have 22.3 orders per day because in a particular shift we have 240 minutes available. If we subtract out 17 minutes of prep and pack time, we get a result of 223 minutes available, and dividing that by the 10 minutes of baking time, that gives us 22.3 orders per day. It's not a bad result for our company right now, but for us to be able to grow, we should be able to take on more orders. So we ask ourselves, what can we do to take on more orders? Our firm suggests that we buy another oven in order to reduce our average baking time. With 2 ovens, we can have 2 sets of orders cooking at the same time, as opposed to only 1 set from our prior setup. If we were able to do this, and we were able to reduce our total baking time from 10 minutes to 8 minutes, we've improved in such a way that we can fulfill more orders per day. This number, in fact, ends up being 27.9 orders per day, which is a vast improvement from 22.3 orders per day. With the increased revenue, we want to also make sure that we can pay off the oven since there is an initial investment in buying another oven. My colleague Reese will show you that we are able to pay back the oven in a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you. Okay. So now that we've addressed the issues presented here for capacity
and as well addressing the bottleneck. We have suggested that we add an additional oven. We wanted to quantify this and go through a cost-benefit analysis to show what we can gain through revenue. Right now, currently, we are operating with one oven, and our capacity is 22. We decided 22 dozen per day. We decided to set our price relative to competition at $5 per dozen. Working with our current capacity, we'll have a revenue of $110, a cost of $15.40, which will result in a final profit of $94.60. Going with the suggestion that we have given here today and adding an additional oven, we will be able to increase our revenue to $135, and factoring in our cost of $18.90, we will then have a final profit of $116.10. Now, this first cost of the additional oven will be $330. However, with our increased revenues and increased profits, we will be able to pay off this oven in 15 days. Now that we've identified these other risks with capacity, there are also some additional risks that are to our current business model. One of these risks is demand uncertainty. We'd like to increase our demand, and by doing this, we can increase our advertising and also reduce our price relative to our competitors. Another risk is our actual competitors. We cannot control the actions of our competitors, but what we can do is increase our ability to maintain loyal customers through maintaining and placing emphasis on our core values of quality and convenience. Another thing that presents a risk is expanding production. Expanding production arises as a risk whenever we increase our demand as well. Two ways to handle this would be adding additional workers and also maintaining flexible business hours. To go along with this, my colleague Allison is going to address some additional ways to increase our capacity.
Thank you, Reese. Other ways to add ways to increase capacity is increasing the hours worked per day. Currently, Kristen's Cookies is operating on a 4-hour workday, but increasing to 5 hours a day would increase the output to about 25 dozen cookies per day. Another option is looking at purchasing a conveyor oven, which would cost around $650. A conveyor oven would allow Kristen's Cookies to utilize multiple trays of baking cookies at one time, as opposed to just one tray at a time. Another option would be to increase the number of trays by buying smaller trays, which would result in, instead of cooking 12 cookies per 10 minutes, to 18 cookies per 10 minutes. Another option is purchasing thinner cookie sheets, which would decrease the baking time from 10 minutes to approximately 9 minutes. Lastly, our long-term recommendation is to purchase a convection oven, and a convection oven would reduce the baking time from 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes per dozen to 7 minutes per dozen, which would then increase capacity from 22.3 dozen per day to 29 dozen per day. In conclusion, our team was able to analyze Kristen's Cookies' current process. By doing so, we were able to identify that the bottleneck was indeed the baking time of 10 minutes. Therefore, our recommendation is to buy an